Career Ministry Lunch and Learn on September 6th today. We are excited to have Devina Valent, who had been a speaker. Many of you heard at our job search workshop recently. And so it's no surprise that so many of you wanted to jump right back in and hear more from her because as you will see, she's just a great dynamic speaker. She has 25 years in a variety of HR roles. She's been with AT&T and has delivered high performance training programs related to leadership and management. She loves to coach and help developing employees. So just wanted to pass it over to you and look forward to what you have to tell.
Great. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to Tracy for asking me to take part in this. Saturday was my first time sharing the deck. It was a recent find. I've been looking for the right place to share my skills, and the Career Alliance team at St. Jude was the perfect fit for me. So I just appreciate the opportunity to come back and share a little bit more specifically around job interviews. We do a lot of work leading up to that point, but once you get the interview, you really have to have your A game on because this is your opportunity to either make it or break it. You either go to the next round or they're cutting you because they don't see what they're looking for. So I really think this is an important topic to revisit, especially specific questions that you're going to have. I just have a few slides that I put together on my own of just things that I like to share with those that are looking for jobs, just to kind of help us remember specific things. We'll do a little bit of role play. I think Tracy said that we're not going to force you. If nobody wants to do role play, which is I'm used to that, I'm willing to jump in and do that myself, but just wanted to make sure we get the most out of the time that we have. So let me get started by sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so can everybody see that now?
Yes, I don't know if there's a way to
I can make it
presentation mode.
Yes, let me do that. How about that?
Perfect. That's perfect. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to start with just preparing for the interview. You definitely want to be able to explain your resume. Vanessa, I was talking to you earlier. It's really important that your resume is clearly showing how are you connecting the dots, especially if you're trying to make a pivot. You don't necessarily have a lot of specific experience in the jobs you're looking for. Maybe it's IT or something else. Your resume, you've got to find transferable skills of what you did before that would easily transfer into an IT role. Find some way to connect those dots on your resume. Because remember, the resume is the first thing that the recruiters look at. So if it's not clear to them, they don't have a lot of time. I think the recruiter told us that they average 20 seconds maybe per resume. So if it's not glaringly obvious that you have skills that are relatable to the job they're trying to fill, then they're going to pass you on. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Researching the company, I think we talked about at the workshop. You want to understand their business. You want to have questions ready to ask in the interview. The worst thing you can do in an interview is at the end when they're done with their questions and they say, so what questions do you have for me? And you say, oh, I don't have any. That's terrible. You should always have at least one question. I don't care if it's about benefits. It doesn't have to be about the job, something. There has to be something that you've come armed with because you're showing them with your questions how much you're interested in them. They want to know, are you just interviewing at them because you're interviewing with 5 other people and you're trying to hedge your bets? Or are you showing them, I really want this. I'm the one you're looking for. So just keep that in mind as you're researching. You're understanding their business, but you're also helping to prepare what questions you want to come into the room with. I typically have a list, at least 10 to 12, but it's the same questions I generally ask because I'm looking for the same roles, because that's my specialty. I'm not pivoting to something different. You definitely want to be talking about your examples, those accomplishments that would be relevant to the job you're applying for. So if I'm coming in for a particular IT role, my examples of my accomplishments that I've done in other jobs make them relevant to the role that you're applying for. Again, that's the way you're verbally connecting those dots for them to make it easier for them to see you as, oh, okay, well, didn't necessarily see that as relevant, but now I can see where that would be helpful in this role. Sometimes they just don't even know that somebody's background, in a different area could easily be relevant here. I learned that when I moved from the HR business partner role that I had done for 18 years and could do it in my sleep. When I took over in the learning and development side of the house, I told my boss several times, you need to be bringing over more business partners to the side of the business, because there were things that I noticed that the L&D team didn't have those skills that I had based on what my background was. So it helped her consider looking at other candidates when she had a vacancy, candidates that she would never have thought to look at before. So just keep that in mind. We talked a lot about STAR behavioral questions, have those ready. Those are things that you've got to remember. It was the situation, the task, the action, the result. And remember, that's all in the 1 minute. You want to quickly show them what that example is. And then, of course, researching the market value of the position. You want to make sure that if they didn't list the salary range for the job, you want to look at the different websites for that title, and also where you are in the country, because Dallas in particular is considered national average. New York would be higher, California would be higher, Puerto Rico would be lower, things like that. So just make sure when you're researching it, you're looking at what's a good range, and then come in with, in your mind, if they talked about money, what your range would be. Should not be a huge range. I wouldn't say a $20,000 range. I would say anywhere from 5 to 7,000 is probably a good place to be. So, any questions before I move on from this one, just the preparing part?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When they ask you like what your requested salary would be, and I know you said the $20,000 range. What if you're looking at hourly? Like what should the range be, like between this much, like $3, like what should that range be hourly?
Okay, so hourly, if you're accustomed to getting paid in a salary and you have a number on mind, let's say, for example, you decide that, okay, 60,000 is what is the number I need to, I can't make any less than that based on my bills. You take 60,000, you divide it by 2,080. That's the number of hours in a year. There's your hourly rate.
Okay.
I think the question was, what kind of range would she go for? Like if they say, do you give it, say you want 20 to 22, what kind of, do you give a wider range? How?
Nope, you still stick with that smaller range. The bigger the range, it's too much for them. Then they're starting to wonder, okay, is this going to work? Because your range is too big. And keep in mind, whatever your bottom number is, they're going to try and get close to that, and they may even go for that first. You cannot give a number that if they offered it to you for that low number, you can't then say, well, no, that's too low. But that's the number you gave them. So I've seen people do that. They give a low number. Then when they get it, then they're upset because they feel like, oh, that's too low. But that's the number you gave me. If you weren't willing to take it, you should have given me a different number. So did that answer the question, or do you need more clarification?
That does answer it a little bit, but just like concrete example, like let's say, like 18 to 30, that would be too big of a range, right? So yeah. Like what would be like a good, like,
so for me, if is 18 your bottom, is that, if that's sure. If that's the bottom, then I would say 18 to 23 or 24. That's okay. Probably about it.
The biggest. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about the research the company and ask them questions. By job interview number 3 with the same company, I was kind of like, I can always ask, what is the next step? But I was kind of running out of questions. What could I have asked that VP? I really don't really work under him, but what would have been a good question to ask them?
So my favorite question, and it's the question I ask at every interview. So can you tell me, what would success look like for this person in this job a year from now? What would you want to see a year from the time that you fill it? They love that question. They either know exactly what it is and they start rattling off the answer and then I'm jotting it down, or they look at me surprised thinking, well, I hadn't even thought of that. Well, I think it would be, but I'm still asking a great question. So it doesn't matter if it's a new company or the same company. That's a valid question. If you're coming into that role, you're going to be measured on how successful you are with your increases, your evaluations, how you manage a team, whatever it is. So I want to know that up front. What does success look like? Because if you're describing something that I don't believe is attainable, this is probably not my job.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help, Frederick?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? All right.
Just to add on that, on salary.com and Glassdoor are good,
Yes.
and payscale.com are good resources for researching salary ranges.
Yes, they are. Okay, so now let's move into the interview. So once you have the interview scheduled, we've talked about this before, you want to dress professional. You want to make sure that it is not too casual. Obviously, depending on where you're interviewing, if you can find out what the dress code is before the interview, if you can ask the recruiter or whatever, because you want to look like everybody else when you show up for the interview, or even if it's on video, you want to mirror them. If you don't have that opportunity, dress up. So, today I've got my jewelry, I've got my, my cardigan and my shirt. So I'm dressed up. But if I was going somewhere else, like, I don't know, Google or Amazon, I might go a little bit dressed down, but I'm not going to look like I just woke up on Saturday morning and went to get coffee. You want to make sure that you look like you are pulled together and you're professional. Smiles, I know it's really kind of cheesy. People talk about smiles. But really and truly, when you're smiling and while you're speaking, you look more comfortable. It's that, living room sofa conversation that I mentioned on Saturday at the workshop. The more you can relax and start to visualize yourself sitting in your living room with that person sitting on your sofa and you're just talking about your background, it's another way to just sort of relax, smile. It's your story. If it's your story, you should be happy about it. So you want to make sure that they feel that you are confident in what you're sharing about yourself. Pausing before you answer questions. I have had some people that I interview that I'm not even done with the question and they're spitting out the answer. Let the interviewer complete the question. Make sure you've heard it, you understand the question, and then start giving them the answer. And make sure that when you're giving them the answer, you're actually answering the question, whether it's with a star story or something else. But I've interviewed a lot of people where I ask the question, they pause, they start answering, and before I know it, we're 3.5 minutes in, they've gone in a circle, and I still don't hear the answer to the question. And depending on how I feel about this person, whether I think they're still a shot, I might ask the question again in a different way. If I still don't get an answer, I'm going to move on, but I'm going to make a note on that question that they didn't answer it, so that doesn't help me. Either you don't know or you are too nervous or what, but it just, that sort of stuff, if you continue to do that, it's harder for them to see you in the role. Answering a question is not that difficult, especially if it's about you. Being confident without being arrogant. I have seen some people come into an interview where they are overly confident and they are acting as if they already have the job. And that turns people off because I'm the one interviewing you, so I'm trying to obtain as much information about you and your background to see, are you going to fit the culture? Are you going to fit in with the team? Do you have the right experience? How much learning time are you going to need? All of those things are going through the hiring manager's head. But when you come in and are arrogant, it's too much. Now, I know that's not as often, doesn't happen as often as the opposite, but it's just important that we don't want to swing too far to the other side of the pendulum when it comes to the confidence piece. But the biggest thing is really knowing what you bring to the table. When I go into an interview, I know exactly what I bring to the table. I rattle off, I find a way to rattle off my 4 strengths. And I shared that with you all at the workshop. I know that I'm a good leader. I've had too many people that I've worked with and who've worked for me give me excellent feedback about my leadership skills. I talk about emotional intelligence, the way that I can build trust with leaders and get them to do things they don't want to do, but they know it's right for the business. Those are the things that I find that I am confident and comfortable sharing those in a clear, succinct, and concise way. You've got to figure out what are those items for you, because those are the things you walk into that interview and you know, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I don't think anybody else has got this, but I do. And that's how you work that into a conversation. So just keep that in mind. Always know what your top 3 or 4 strengths are so that you can weave them into that conversation. You definitely want to talk about those unique skills and abilities that make you unique, that maybe not another candidate would have. So if it's a particular experience at another company, if it's a particular project that you've done, whatever it is, there's got to be something you've done in the past that makes you unique. It doesn't even have to be work specific. It could be like the leadership skills that I've talked about. We've all worked for people who should never have been a supervisor. Maybe they were a great salesperson. Maybe they were a great IT person. But when they got into the role of a supervisor, they don't know how to manage people. They don't know how to talk to them. They don't know how to coach. Those, to me, that's something that I use as a differentiator for myself. So what's yours? Think about what that is. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? Okay.
I have a quick question. A quick question.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Yeah. Okay. During the interview, you think if you want the interviewer or even the hiring manager can hire you, although maybe you are not a very good fit in the position, but for the fact that maybe you are the only one person that can hire, you think it's possible that the company hire?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood the question.
Okay, let's say you have an interview. The interviewer finished the interview with you, and just because for the fact that maybe there is not enough candidate for the position, and maybe let's say maybe you are the only one, and they realize that they still need somebody for this position, although you don't really fit. The position, that you think it's still possible that the company hire you for the position?
Probably not. I mean, I've had to repost jobs before. I've interviewed, several people. None of them seemed to have what I'm looking for, so I just reposted it. I didn't hire any of the people I interviewed. So okay. I would not say that it's a guarantee that yes, you would be hired if you're the only one who applied and the only one they interviewed. If you're not who they're looking for, if you're not demonstrating to them, I'm the one you've been looking for. Let me show you what I've done and what I can do for you. If you're not able to clearly do that for them, they're going to just pass you over and they will repost the job. I've been watching the internet since January before I learned about the networking piece. And I have seen jobs continually pop up again and again. And I'm thinking, why isn't this company filling this role? What's taking so long? So to me, I look at that and wonder, okay, is it the company? Is it a bad experience? Or is it they're not getting the right candidates? So it's not a guarantee that if you're the only one that you get it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more costly for the company to have a hire that's not a good fit than it is to keep looking, no matter, how much they want to fill the role. It's really.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else on the interview? Okay. So we talked a lot about STAR method. This is the example I gave at the Saturday workshop about the situation, task, action, and result. These are the ones you've got to keep in your back pocket. You need to have several of these and have them, because it's one thing to say, well, I am really good at taking something complex and simplifying it. Okay, I could say that all day long. But if I follow it up with, and here's how I've done it in the past. Our benefits team every year used to publish a 38-page document outlining the benefit changes for the following year. My clients complained for years that they don't have time to read that. I took it upon myself to just take their documents, boil it down to a single-page summary outlining the changes and the differences. My clients loved it. The benefits team approved it. And then later they adopted it. And it's now the new summary document that is used across the entire company for benefit changes. That was less than a minute, but I hit on everything: the situation, the task, the action, the result. That to me, it's proof that you have got the ability to take something complex and simplify it. If you just list off your characters, your characteristics, but you don't actually have any examples to follow up with even a few, it's really hard to know whether you're just embellishing or you're just listing them off, but when you come in with real live examples, that makes me kind of sit forward and think, okay, tell me more. That's what you want. You want them to know what those examples are and whether they want to hear more. Anytime they want to hear more, that's a good sign. Anybody have any questions? I know these can be hard to write, but once you get into the rhythm, I think you'll find it's not that difficult.
I have a question. Are we supposed to include a star story in the cover letter?
You can.
Okay.
You can, but would keep it brief.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like that would take up a lot of text. Like,
yes.
Yeah. So maybe like, instead of including like a situation, task, action, result, like not include all of those details.
What you could do is maybe, I have in the cover letter, start with your beginning opening, but then list maybe just a little bit of your experience and maybe a result. So I think some of the examples that we covered in the workshop was the cover letter, including your beginner, your intro, and then leading how you have experience in the job that you're applying for, and a result. Maybe if it was a savings or you developed something new, but something very quick, even just a bullet point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have one quick question following up on the cover letter. I actually wanted to ask it in the workshop and I never got around to it. Are cover letters sort of mandatory to sort of differentiate you, in terms of the better candidate applying for the job, or?
No, I have talked to many recruiters, and depending on which recruiter you talk to, some say, yeah, I look at those just to scan them. And then other recruiters say, I don't have time to read those. I just go straight for the resume. If I don't see what I'm looking for in the 20 or 30 seconds, I move on. So it really just depends, because sometimes it would end up going to just the recruiter. Sometimes it might end up going to the hiring manager. So unless you know who's looking at it, you're just not going to know for sure whether it is a differentiator. Okay. But if you want to do it, I mean, it couldn't hurt, right? There's
more, yeah.
Yeah.
So when the posting does when they say please to apply, send a cover letter and resume, at that point you would want to do that, correct?
You would or would not?
You would, if it specifically says to apply, send a cover letter and resume.
Sure. Oh yeah.
That time you wouldn't want to leave it off if they specifically request it. But I think, like sometimes you're applying on LinkedIn or an easy apply or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily need to add one at that point.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Can you use the STAR method for a job that you didn't have on your resume, like in a previous job? I only have like 10 years or less on there, but I have more experience. Can I still use that in the job interview and then maybe say it's not during this time period, but it was during a different time period?
I probably wouldn't even go that far if it's not in this time period. I would just say I had a previous role and tell your STAR story. So I wouldn't even get into the detail of, well, it's not necessarily the most recent. No, they don't care. They just want to hear something that you can articulate that helps them decide, do you have what I'm looking for? Should I consider you further?
Yep. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Devina, I've got a quick one, hopefully. What's too long? I mean, I know we're trying to keep everything concise in a minute or less, but like if you've got a super complex story, 2 minutes maybe?
I would keep in mind, they don't know you. And they've asked you a question, you're answering. And if you're going on too long, 2 minutes doesn't sound like a long time, but it really is. And as a hiring manager, when I ask you a question, I'm listening for something that you're saying that's resonating with the job I'm trying to fill. And if you're going on with too much detail and that I don't necessarily need, I'm already thinking about, okay, what's the next question? Because this is too much. You got to be concise. This verbiage that I have here from my mind, it took me 3 attempts to shorten it because I kept going into too much detail, So whatever you have, try your best to shave it down, get it as close to a minute as you can. Because remember, if they want to hear more, they'll ask you, tell me more.
Okay, thanks.
That help?
Yes,
Sure.
thank you.
Anybody else? Great question so far. Okay. Now this is the role play part that I wanted to try. Just these are some of those common job interview questions. I think many of these were on the list that was at the workshop, but I think it's really important to sort of role play these and practice them. So I can start unless somebody else wants to start. Pick a question that you want me to ask you. Otherwise, Tracy's going to ask me one and then I'll answer how I would answer.
Do we have any volunteers or anyone who would like to answer questions? And you don't have to do it now. We can start. Devina can start, and you can pick one later in the list.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and start with you then, Devina. And okay, can you tell me a little about yourself?
Absolutely. So I have got over 25 years of experience in HR in various roles such as benefits, mergers and acquisitions, project lead. Majority of it was in the business partner role, and then my last role was in the L&D group. So really love HR. It's my niche. I specialize really in leading teams, developing high performing teams. I love taking complex areas and simplifying them so it's easier to digest. But most importantly, I really love the ability to establish and foster relationships with leaders, helping them understand what needs to be done, why it needs to be done, and helping them do things that they normally wouldn't do because they're uncomfortable.
Great. Very good. Okay. Is there anyone that would like to take a stab at that after hearing her example? Okay. After that polished example, I don't blame you because I feel the same way. You can tell she's practiced this a few times, right? So I think that's the goal, and we are happy to do role playing with you as well. But it takes a little time. You can record yourself. You can ask, ask someone to ask these questions to you. I think we'll give you a list of some of the most common ones. You can also Google that, and it gives you some frameworks of how to answer as well. The article that I sent.
I have a question.
Sure. 1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the article that I sent, if you click on the link to Crossroads, they specifically give a very nice summary and framework for how to answer this particular question because it is one of the most common. So yes, go ahead with the question.
Why would you start with, I have 25 years of experience in today's market? Could you say that without saying the number of years, saying something like, I'm a senior level executive or a mid-level executive, and I've done this. So they get that you have the breadth of experience, but you don't put anything age disqualifying out there.
I certainly can. I mean, that it's completely a personal choice. It doesn't have to be listing the number of years. I think I got into the habit of that because at AT&T, everybody carries around their years of service like a badge. Every time you go into a meeting, everybody introduce themselves. Every single person in the room would list how many years of service they had. So it's probably a 25-year habit that I guess I probably should start to break.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the role too. So, in a marketing role or in a role, if you're applying for, working with college students or something like that, you may be more hesitant to, dwell on your years of experience if you feel like you have too many. Again, if you only have one, you might not start with that as well. So I think it really depends on the role, but there's certainly a lot of different ways of answering it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else want to be asked one of these questions, or should I continue with Devina? Okay. Hearing no takers, I'll continue. So what are your strengths and weaknesses?
So I would have to say my strengths are definitely taking complex issues and simplifying them. Also building and fostering relationships with leaders at every level, helping them learn things that they maybe were not aware that they still needed to work on to be better leaders. And also just really having an organized way of doing business. I typically have a calendar that's full of reminders, not just for myself, but reminders to remind others to do things. I'm very good at follow-up. When it comes to weakness, there is something that I've worked on quite a bit, and it's really making sure that when I'm working with a team, whether they're my employees or even peers on a project, I tend to forget to ask the question of how are you doing? So that's something that I've worked on, and now it's a part of my one-on-ones or even project calls to just ask, how are you doing? Do you need help? Is there anything more I can do to help keep us on track? Just to ask the direct question and get the real answer. And so as a supervisor, when I have those one-on-ones with my team, I always make sure that's one of the first questions I ask when we start the call.
So I really liked how you talked about your weakness in a way that you've shown a way that you've overcome it or that you're working on it. So I think that, anytime it's possible, it's very likely that you might be asked for a weakness, and just, be honest and use one that is something that you've struggled with. But anytime you can turn it into a positive or show, that how you've worked around it, that is very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, Devina, how do you keep yourself organized when balancing multiple projects?
So as I mentioned before, I am very organized. I've always been that way, even since I was a kid. So I use a lot of technology to stay on track. I use project trackers to follow up. I have reminders on my calendars to remind others. It's a constant, almost like a Tetris game, where I'm constantly looking at my Excel documents or my project trackers to keep up with what's happening that I'm responsible with, but also who's bringing me something that is supposed to be on time to keep my overall work on track. So it's a lot of maneuvering, it's a lot of communication, but mainly it's really just the organization of using the tools I have to keep in touch with not only what's happening, but also to share that information with my supervisor. I never want them to be surprised if something is slowing down at a full stop or even exceeding the goals. I like to communicate the status of that in my one-on-ones on a regular basis.
Great. Any questions from anyone before we move on? Okay, why are you interested in this position?
So this is something that I have been looking for quite a while. I spent a lot of time in similar roles, and I really think that the experience I bring to the table in the HR business partner role is something that would be an easily transferable move into the role that you have. I think all of the experience I have with dealing with international companies, leaders at all levels, all sizes, I've supported as small groups as only 500, but I've also had client groups as large as 6,000, including non-exempt, exempt, non-bargained, bargained. All of those really, I think, help with getting a big perspective, but also working with centers of excellence to stay on track and provide all of the best advice and counsel to my clients, depending on whether they're making a business decision that's related to employee changes, but also knowing what those laws are, what we can and can't do, where we can bend some rules, where we need to for the business, and where we need to do a full stop and make sure that the leaders understand why we can't move forward.
Very good. Okay, and what are you expecting to make?
So the salary expectations, I think that when I looked at what's on the website, it seems to be within the realm that I'm looking for. My low is 100,000, and I definitely would be willing to go as high as 110, but that's really what I'm looking for, and that appears to be within the range that was posted with the position.
Okay, and can you tell me why you're looking for a new position?
So unfortunately, I spent quite a few years with AT&T, and like many companies, they've gone through a downsizing. The department I worked for was client-based, and it was client-funded. And so when they were hit with a huge financial restraint at the end of last year, they decided to severely cut their budget for training. And unfortunately, that involved my position and quite a few of my team. And we now have an entire group going to a vendor. So the position was more of a wrong place, wrong time, but I'm using it as an opportunity to see where else I can take that knowledge and help another group.
Great.
I have one.
Go ahead.
if you don't mind. So, Davina, I noticed you did not use the layoff word. Is it something we should avoid when we answer that question?
Sorry if that wasn't clear. I'll have to practice that again.
Okay, just wanted to make sure, because I want to know, was it intentional, purposely you did not say layoff?
No, I've used the term before in other interviews because I don't want to hide anything because I didn't do anything wrong. So that's why I feel comfortable using that word layoff, because it's, it's an involuntary separation. So I definitely want to make sure that they know the circumstances behind it. It was not a layoff of I was the only one, or I was only, one of like 5 and they let go of the bottom performers. No, that particular layoff involved over 300 people. And when they just finished stage 2, it was another 300 to 400. So
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Alana, do you have a question?
Yeah. Davina, would you say it's okay, like, if the reason why you left your last job was because you moved, but it wasn't like an out-of-state move, it was like 30 miles or 20 miles, and it would have made your commute like a lot, like kind of doable, but pretty hard. Is that like a valid reason, do you think, for explaining why you left your last job?
I mean, yes, I do. I mean, I personally, right now in my job search, I'm not looking at anything in downtown Dallas. I drove that commute for 10 years. I don't want to do it anymore. So for me, that's not my main reason, but for you, that's a personal choice. You want to feel comfortable that whatever the commute is, it's something that you are willing to do, and it's not going to become a hindrance. They don't want to hear from you a year from now as, oh, this is too far for me to drive. I don't want to do it anyway. You need to be comfortable. So I think just sharing that there was a point in time when I had to make a decision and the commute just became too much for me. So I chose to move and shorten my commute. And now I'm working at another place or whatever it was. But I don't think that the commute is a poor reason. I mean, it's valid because you don't know what the reason is. If you had kids and you didn't want to be late picking them up, or if it's just something you just don't want to do. I mean, I can tell you at this age, I don't want to be in the car 90 minutes one way. I don't. But that's what I did for many years, and I just don't want to do it anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before I move on? And is there anyone that's wanting to role play? Okay, we will certainly do that one-on-one if you would like. So, okay, Devina, are you applying for other jobs?
Actually, I just want to ask, do you want to stop here and go to the other slides? Because I know we're down to 15 minutes. So.
Yes, okay. I would like to do that. Let's do that. Okay. And then if we end up having time, we'll come back to that very last question.
All right. Okay, so these are some of the interview no-nos. When I wrote this, I didn't know who my audience would be, but I do want to make sure everyone's clear that the categories that you see here listed, except for the political affiliation, the ones from age or genetic information all the way down to religion, those are part of Title VII, which is a federal law that does not allow any interviewer to ask you questions about these categories in an interview. Really, they should never be asking you these questions at all. But some people don't know that. And I know a lot of times people get comfortable in an interview and someone will, well, how many kids do you have? Or oh, I see you're limping. So is that, they may not realize that they're asking an inappropriate question, but I just wanted to make sure that none of these questions are appropriate. The political affiliation is inappropriate, but it's not listed in Title VII, so it's not protected under federal law. What I want to make sure you know is if somebody asks you a question, whether it's direct or indirect, you have a couple of options. If you want to be more bold, you can say, I don't think that's an appropriate question. Some people may feel like, ooh, I don't want to say that. I could lose a job. Okay, if you don't want to be that bold, then you can simply say, I'm not sure I'm comfortable answering that question. Because if you think about it, in the application process, there's a whole list of some of these items that are part of their application process because they're a government contractor. Some of the items will give you the option of, I prefer not to answer. That's basically what you're saying. I prefer not to answer. You're just saying it a different way.
So I've been asked, a couple of times, even though I put in like I'm a US citizen and I still, of course, I have an accent.
Yes.
They still ask me, so they don't have to do that? So they don't have to ask me again if I'm really an American citizen?
If you don't want to answer it directly, you can just simply say, actually, that's a part of my application in there.
Okay.
So if you don't want to answer it again, you could answer it that way, as all of that information is actually in my application.
Gotcha.
So they are allowed to ask, are you legally able to work in the US?
Correct. Yes, because they're asking, are you legally able to work? That's not the same as country of origin or citizenship. They're not asking. They can't answer that. Ask that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vanessa, did you have a question?
Yes, I just want to know if an interviewer, I mean, a recruiter can hire, I mean, somebody based on his personal, I mean, preference, like maybe you have been too nice during the interview, he can hire you, or maybe, you know, he didn't really like you and whatever. So I don't know if that's possible.
So the recruiter is not the hiring manager. The recruiter is there to simply go through resumes and do pre-screenings and come up with a short list of people for the hiring manager to interview. So the recruiter doesn't make the hiring decision, it's the hiring manager. But if the hiring manager has those opinions, technically, yes. I mean, if they want to make that their hiring decision off of something subjective like that, they could. I mean, it would be, I don't want to say dangerous, but it would be reckless, because you're not putting the right person in the role for the right reasons. You're basing it off emotion. But technically they could do that.
Yes, that's a problem sometimes. Yeah.
Caution a hiring manager that if that's how you're going to make your hiring decisions, you're putting yourself and the company at risk, because someone else who applied for the job and interviewed wasn't selected. If they want to, they can come back and file suit, whether with an attorney or go to EEO and pick any one of these categories and say, I didn't get that job because one of these things. And going to the EEO office is free. It doesn't cost you a dime. But it's a big headache for the company.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Sanjeet had a question. Do you have to pass the recruiter hurdle before you get to the hiring manager?
Yes, typically you do. It's pretty rare that the hiring managers don't have a recruiter assigned to them to help them, because when you open up a position, you could get hundreds of resumes. They want the recruiter to narrow it down. So it's pretty rare to get to the hiring manager without going through a recruiter.
But that is also a strategy if you do know some people in the company, and finding out who the hiring manager is, that is advantageous to be able to get, be able to get in touch with them or have an introduction. That's a lot of times what we see is, why it's who you know a lot of times, is because if someone can recommend you directly to the hiring manager, that gives you a huge lead on a lot of the screen out that could happen before that.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you can go ahead and continue.
All right. Okay, so we talked about this describing strengths and weaknesses. I just wanted to show you a couple of examples that I found on the internet that were awesome. The first one on the strengths, I know this is a bit long, so I left it because it was the full story, but I know that you could probably cut this down a little bit if this was applicable to you. This is talking through the strengths of an executive assistant, really creating new processes, how they affect the business, how it ultimately gives a more consistent approach to the way that she supported the group that she was assigned to and really kept things running smoothly. So this is a really good example, because it's hitting all of the right things that you want to share when you're providing that answer on your strengths. So I'll give everybody just a minute to read through that. Any questions about how it's written or what you might use? All right. Okay, so let's go on to the weakness. This one, when I found this, I read it and I thought this could be me. So this is what I've adopted as my own weakness. So the item I shared when we were doing the role play, this is where it came from. Because when I read through it, I thought this is exactly what I've done before. I just hadn't seen it written so well. So that's what I've adopted, and I use quite a bit of the language that's in this example for a weakness. Because yes, it is definitely considered a weakness, but again, as Tracy mentioned, it really helps at the bottom where it kind of rounds it out with now everything you've developed a good and trusting relationship with your employees.
Great.
Okay. That's it, folks. That was everything I had. I just want to make sure that you guys have a few minutes for more Q&A. So I'll just open that up.
I have another question, if it's
Mhm.
okay. So I've been doing quite a few interviews, and I had one very, very strange interview where it was supposed to have been a video interview, but I was the only one on video. That felt pretty uncomfortable. So I think it was about 4 people. Actually, it was international. Well, it was, I could say the company anyway, it doesn't matter. It was Boeing, but most of the people interviewing were out of the US. And they wanted the position for this area, the Plano area. How I kind of almost was tempted to ask to turn on the camera because I felt very odd. How would you handle some? I mean, that's kind of a large question in terms of how would you handle it. But I mean, is that something that's okay? You think? I mean,
So you were interviewing with multiple people? It was a panel?
yes, it was a panel of it was 4 of us, so 3 of the and it was a hiring manager and I guess maybe his lead, so whoever
Okay.
was on the call. I think a director, the hiring manager, and one lead guy.
Okay.
All guys, all men.
Mhm.
And they were all foreign men as well. Based on the names, I'm just, of course, just assuming that, yeah.
Mhm.
And of course, they were internationally because they told me that I had to do it at 7:30 in the morning because of the time change. Yeah, but no one else put on their cameras. I was thinking, oh, at first I thought maybe because it's they must be nighttime there, and they're probably doing it from home and maybe wanted to be in comfy clothes. So I thought, but I just felt I prepared adequately. I was well dressed and
Mhm.
prepared. It's at 7:30 in the morning, and they did not put on the camera. That was odd. I also did not get that job as well, but I'm just was wondering.
So if it was me, I would have had my camera on because
I
I
did.
want the opportunity to look at the camera.
Yes, yes.
Because as I'm talking to you, I'm not looking at my slide in front of me. I'm looking at you in the camera. So they're going to see your face. You want that human connection.
So I
They
had
want to see your face. They want to see you smile. They want to see your eyes light up when you're talking about your accomplishments and what you can do for them. It's all about that human connection.
yeah.
So if you are not turning on your camera, it's harder for them to see you and really feel and hear what it is that you're bringing to them that they've been looking for, and they just didn't know it was you.
No, so Davina, what I'm saying, I had my camera on. I
Yes,
was facing the firing squad, if you
yeah,
ask, because I did not
yes,
see anybody. I saw none of them. And
okay,
these are the people I would be working with, but none of
yes.
them turned on their camera.
It's
So the
rude.
time,
In my view, it's rude, but I do think that you did the right thing by having your camera on. Um, Not sure why they wouldn't have theirs on, but it's unusual. I've had the same thing happen to me, but it's unusual. Not my preference.
yeah. And then the segue to that is I was going to ask you as well. I know we spoke about how to answer questions, but I've also had situations where I think the questions posed to me were just out of this world, weird, crazy questions, totally irrelevant. I've had some that are, I can't pinpoint it now, but I had one that was very specific about honing in on one area of my resume, but sort of going outside of the box. I think it was something to do with TIPCO. So I did TIPCO business works in terms of on one of my jobs at FedEx. And the interviewer went totally off tangent on TIPCO business events, which is a different area of TIPCO. And I wondered, what was that an attempt to sort of maybe see if I knew more, or it just made me, because it was nothing I spoke to on my resume. So I was going to ask, I know we have good questions, like the questions you posed as to what are good questions to practice, but also how do you handle when you get a bad question? I mean, how do you navigate out of that without making yourself look, like a fool, really?
So keep in mind, if this person went off on a tangent in a different area, not all your hiring managers know how to hire. I think Greg mentioned that at the workshop. You're going to have some people that they're bad at it. They're bad interviewers. They don't have their questions organized well, or they don't have, in my view, valuable questions. Kind of stuck just answering the question that they give you unless you feel it's inappropriate. So even though they've gone off on a tangent, just answer the question, because you don't want them to label you as, well, she didn't answer the question. Answer the question, even if it's, that's a different area of the business that I wasn't a part of. So, I mean, that's your answer. But yeah, just keep in mind that they're not always good interviewers. Sometimes they stink at it.
Yeah. Well, I know we're wrapping up to the end, and some people have other commitments at 1, but I just wanted to thank you, Devina, for all of your great information, and all of you for participating and asking good questions. And just know that we're a resource for you. If you have other questions that you didn't get a chance to ask, we're happy to help you with that. And just know we're continuing to pray for you and your search, and hope that you have a good, productive week, and just appreciate you being on. So anything else that you guys want to say to Devina before she leaves?
No, thank you so much for what you do and all the information you give.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Very helpful.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.